Schaefer, how you doing this morning?
I'm doing good. How you guys doing?
What's up, Schaefer?
Not, just coming off of one of the more crushing NFL runs. I think everything I was tied to, whether it was my team and the Vikings, gambling, fantasy, pools, whatever it was, just absolutely annihilated. Like half a dozen games in which the result or whatever I need, the team is up double digits at some point in the game, only to lose. So it's just not great over here, actually, to be honest.
Schaefer, I was actually thrilled with your Vikings result on Sunday because I had them plus 2.5. So I was actually very pleased with how that went.
Well, with the plus 2.5, they could also have just won 20-15, and
that's what I'm thinking here too.
It's
Schaefer.
true,
but the Bears were plus 5 or 5.5 or whatever.
Oh, you're Bears! Wow.
Yeah, you knew that.
That is the all-time. We're definitely not tanking, but we definitely weren't going to try to win that game. Yeah, those 3 play calls when they got the ball back.
Man,
someone should be joining Matt Canada on the unemployment line today.
And you know what? Let's add in Luke Getsy. Let's add in Matt Eberflus. Let's just give them all. Yeah, we will blame Canada.
You might have to. You might just have to clean house over there. So are you out on the Josh Dobbs experience, or you? What's going on there?
No, not out on it. I mean, like this is what you're gonna get, right? Like he's a highly mobile quarterback that's not the most skilled passer and has ball security issues. I mean, he had fumble problems in Arizona before he got to Minnesota. His first game with the Falcons, first game with the Vikings, but against the Falcons, I mean, he had a couple horrible fumbles right off the bat. So it's not like super surprising. It's just annoying to see Alexander Mattison fumble when you're up 17-9 in field goal position, driving, running the ball for like 8 yards a pop, and then he just coughs it up on a play that he probably shouldn't have. I mean, Minnesota's defense couldn't get off the field. No one was quite able to figure out. I shouldn't say that. Couldn't get off the field at the end of the game. You make Russell Wilson go 75 yards to beat you. Like, he probably shouldn't be able to go 75 yards by dinking and dunking to Pirine. So it's just an annoying loss, but it didn't ultimately matter. Like, Minnesota's still very, very good spot. They still have an incredibly light schedule ahead of them. Watching the Bears and the Lions, like it just feels like the Lions are just holding off revealing who they actually are. I was asking people if they are like the NFC Dolphins, where it's a cool, fun story, but you don't have to take it that serious because in the end, they're really not a threat to anybody that matters. So it is tough for me to take that Lions team serious. By the way, shouldn't Aiden Hutchinson be more of a four? I obviously had the big play at the end. Isn't that just like his 4th sack of the season or something? Like you would expect a little bit more out of that guy.
He needs to be more Max Crosby, Nick Bosa. He needs to elevate TJ Watt, like elevate to that level for sure.
He's no Bosa. That's all we know.
He's no Daniil Hunter. That's what we know as well. Few people are. That guy's a stud.
Schaefer, speaking of quarterbacks that weren't starting for your team this year, let's move over to Nebraska and talk a little bit about Chubba Purdy, who Matt Rule called a spark yesterday in his press conference. And frankly, maybe the best we've seen all year from a Nebraska quarterback that play, or at least his play last weekend. What did the team's third stringer, and I'm going to emphasize third stringer when I say this, do that brought that much needed spark? Or do you think, not really, or do you think, and do you think, even if Harburg is, say, 100% healthy this week, it should be Chubba's job?
This might not have the popularity of the Eras tour, but this week I feel like I'm going on I was completely wrong here tour as it's related to Chubba Purdy and what I anticipated he would be able to give Nebraska against Wisconsin. I didn't think they were going to score a touchdown in that game. I really didn't. I like the Chubba experience was pretty bad last year. The behind the scenes of it didn't sound particularly great. I did not have a lot of confidence in Nebraska being able to move the ball. And so then, of course, on the first drive, he's somehow outrunning the entire Wisconsin defense. And then same with Jalen Lloyd on the next touchdown. And then you're just thinking Wisconsin's throwing the towel in. two, they don't have any athletes on the back end. Nebraska should have at least 2 more of these long touchdowns in them with the way that game started. Of course, they didn't, they lose. But it wasn't because of Chubba. I mean, he played pretty well. And obviously, it's all tempered, right? Like, it's not like expectations were really high. But he came in, he threw catchable balls. He was able to move the offense. I thought that drive before half to set up the field goal, they hit a couple pass plays, one of them to Malachi Coleman in the middle. There was some nice moments in there for Chubba. I mean, definitely had everything going for the redemption arc. They just couldn't finish in overtime, which he's far from the first quarterback to be handed the loss in overtime without able to put up a point. So he shouldn't, he can join his friends and Adrian Martinez and, everyone else that has unfortunately fallen in that category. Tanner Lee. Let's see, who else are we? Tommy Armstrong, I think, has been part of this too.
I'll say he was on the front end, I think. Yeah.
It's not just like it's quarterbacks that haven't been particularly good. It's just Nebraska. It doesn't matter the situation. They're just not scoring in overtime.
Schaefer, was there a part of you when, you see Chubba Purdy house call one immediately, you see Jalen Lloyd do it on the next drive. Was there a part of you at that point where you're like, oh, Nebraska might beat the crap out of them?
Yeah. But this be what, maybe fourth time. I didn't look this up, but I was thinking about it. Third or fourth time they've had a double-digit lead against Wisconsin and then failed to put them away. Like this isn't unusual for Nebraska at this point. I know, and one of the most famous Bo Pelini games of all time, where Melvin Gordon runs for 400 plus yards. Nebraska was up 17-3 in that game. So, they're up 17-3 and you gave up the rushing record at the time.
Hard
only to be shattered by the running back I mentioned earlier in this game for being, the check down recipient of Russell Wilson's big day on Sunday night. So everything comes full circle. It was, it felt like it was there for just sort of this cathartic, like, get it all out there, kind of like Iowa last year, like you hit on some of those big plays and then you just felt good about Nebraska's defense throughout. And it didn't work that way. I mean, a couple of bugaboos and then ultimately what has been a killer in this month of November and really kind of quietly has derailed a lot of the season, the special teams. Yeah. I mean, whether we want to talk about missing the field goal right before half, whether we want to talk about the punt, coverage unit giving up, I think, 30-ish yards of field position in a game which ends up in overtime, whether we want to talk about the fact Brian Buschini has 6 total kicks this year of 50 yards or more after doing it, I think, 16 times last year. So there's a lot of concern there. And it's cost Nebraska games, not a game, multiple games, with their inability to manage field position, inability to flip a field, inability to pin an opponent deep, all of these different things. And then that's to say nothing of the absolute lack of spark this team has had on kick returns or punt returns since today Ramir Johnson has basically, had the shoulder injury. So special teams have been really, really rough for Nebraska in 2023. I mean, if you want something that should be a silver lining heading into 2024, in theory, you're changing out a lot of key components. I know they're recruiting some specialists like kick returner, punt returner type players. So they're obviously attempting to address this. But, man, it is frustrating when you look up and you realize in a conference that sort of, writes an I love you card every year to punting, this laissez-faire 25-yard punts have destroyed your season. And it's really rough because Brian Buschini was the guy, right? Like he came in and he stabilized it for 1 year. This isn't new. Nebraska struggled with punting for a while. And then I don't know what happened, but from the Minnesota game on, it's just been this kind of like decline to the point where, reporters are talking about him punting at half or before games. And it's, there's less pressure in those situations and it's still pretty erratic. Like they can't count on him. That's hard. I'm not saying that Timmy Bleakroad needs to go in, but he's got one career punt for 51 yards. At this point, I'm intrigued. We've just seen what Chubba Purdy can do. Why not just find everybody's backup in the season of backups,
it's kind of a weird, like, who was it? Was it Connor Culp that was the kicker that was really, really good and then totally, like, the wheels fell off the next year?
Yeah.
It's almost the punting version of that with Buschini here. I mean, I don't know enough about kicking and specialists to have any idea what may have happened, but I do think you have to don't you kind of have to explore other options at this point?
Look, I think you're beyond. Like, you have one game left. Like, maybe you tried out Timmy Bleakroad to do it, but my guess is, given that it's senior day and this
Probably
coaching
not.
staff has been really, really fluid in allowing guys to kind of play through their issues. I don't see them making any change for Friday, but like this is, the most on-brand analysis you're going to find, right? On Friday, you are going to watch a team whose punting has derailed or hurt them most of the season versus a team who emphasized punting so much that they punt more than anyone in the conference, and they're the best at doing. They've weaponized their punting. Nebraska is looking into what it would want to be, and they are nowhere close. It's like, this sort of idea where you want the third phase to matter. Well, you're facing the team that ultimately dominates the third phase. And for you, it's been a disaster in November, like a total disaster. Every game has had some sort of huge special teams flaw in it that has cost you something. And you've lost these games by a total of, 13 points across 3 games. I mean, 3 one-score losses in the month of November to 3 reeling teams, and your special teams hasn't been able to pick you up. Like, they are in a dangerous territory on Friday, because that is an edge that Iowa takes advantage of all the time, and will do so happily in the stadium on Friday.
Shafe's got me thinking. I posted or reposted the video of the Iowa mascot shooting the hot dog out of the cannon yesterday, and I made fun of Deacon Hill's pass. I think it actually fits more with Brian Buschini's.
It might be a Buschini punt.
I'm embarrassed at how hard I laughed at that video. Because, like, when it got sent to me and the caption basically, I was like, oh man, someone's just sitting in like the front row, and
I thought somebody was going to get annihilated.
And so, I'm sitting there. It's like Homer Simpson with the Hans Moleman, football in the groin video. Like, I think I'm going to watch someone just take a hot dog shot to the face, and then it just comes out, and it
just flops.
The look from the mascot to the other. It's incredible. I'm laughing just thinking about it.
You could tell the mascot, like, you could see through his mascot head there.
He felt
looking over at like his team member, like,
pure.
Are you kidding me?
Like, he looked like Mahomes looking at Valdez Scantling. Like, are you serious right now?
Yeah, definitely needed that touchdown too.
All right, Chafe. We talked a little bit about this on right after the game. Ravi and I doing the post game spread on Hurrdat Sports, and we mentioned how there was just a lack of finding offensive tempo after those first 2 scores. It's almost as though Satterfield went away from what was working. And my question to you is this: how much self-evaluation and soul searching do you think Satterfield needs to do to understand that he's really been missing the mark with offensive tempo? Because it does seem like every time something is working, he changes up the scheme instead of bruising up a defense with what's working.
Yeah, I definitely think there's a lot of self-scouting that goes into it, but so much of it will be done in the vein of, like, this was your first run of going through the Big Ten. What did we learn about the looks that we're going to get? What worked in regards to sort of the Big Ten defenses we expect to see most of the time? What worked personnel-wise for what we are anticipating we're going to come back? I don't know it'll be as reflective as what, people might particularly want, and obviously people want a lot more than just reflectiveness from their offensive coordinator right now. But I continue to be in this weird spot where I don't feel like Marcus Satterfield has done a particularly good job, but I also look at, like, the situation that he's in, and it's hard for me to really sometimes understand, like, everyone just wants Nebraska to be this 80% run the ball team when the 2 biggest plays they hit on Saturday were in the passing game. Chubba Purdy scramble and the Jalen Lloyd touchdown pass. Like, they need those plays because they cannot line it up and run the football at people. They cannot do that consistently. And a lot of it they can't do because there's about 9 guys in the box, almost, 70% of your possession. So they have to be able to throw the football. Like where I run into my biggest questions of Satterfield is often timing of certain plays.
Mm-hmm.
Like the first down call in overtime with the option for a quarterback that hasn't gotten that many reps this year and looked completely uncomfortable doing it. Just felt like, we're going to, too cute by half, I guess. We're going to catch them completely off guard here with this play. And it didn't work. Same with the Jalen Lloyd thing, where I can understand the idea, but it's also just like, if this doesn't work, we have learned this offense has to be on schedule almost to the max in order to survive. It, more than anyone, cannot afford an 8-yard loss on the first play of a drive. Like if it's 2nd and 9 and you're trying to dial up something unique, then I think I can understand a little bit more. First 10, let's just stay on schedule. Like, so there's certain things in there that I definitely take issue with. Overall, I think a lot of it is really hard to call on offense where you haven't had that many reps with the quarterback. He probably doesn't have the full playbook of use to him because of the lack of those reps. And he has a different skill set than the guy before him and the guy had before that. I mean, if you think about it, Chubba Purdy, Jeff Sims, and Heinrich Carberg are 3 wildly different quarterbacks. And Nebraska's had to employ an offense for all 3 of them for at least one full game.
Schaefer, want to flip over to the other side of the ball. We're talking with Mike J. Schaefer from Husker 24/7. You mentioned we're talking about Satterfield. Let's talk about Tony White, the defensive coordinator. Rule talked about yesterday how he's, fielded some, at least a call from a search firm and kind of was advocating for his guy to get that job. What level of, I guess, concern do you have about Tony White being here next year or not?
If it was like on a scale of 10, I'm probably at a 4, I think, right now.
Okay.
Which is maybe lower than where other people might be, but I look at it like this. I don't think he's going to go back to Syracuse. I think that, there was an attempt to get out of that situation for a reason, to take, what a lot of people would have viewed as a lateral job to a degree. Obviously, you're going to make a lot more money, so there's nothing lateral about the contract he got from Nebraska.
Mm-hmm.
But he's still a defensive coordinator for sort of a team that in recent history is, kind of a shoulder shrug. So there's a reason he came to Nebraska from Syracuse. So I'm less concerned about that opening. And then you look at the San Diego State situation, and it is a job that he has a lot of love for. It's where he grew up as a coach. He held a lot of positions over there. I mean, recruiting coordinator, working all the way up to, I believe he was calling defensive plays at one point, in his career before moving on to Arizona State. That's actually where I met Tony White when he was out there at San Diego State, and we were both at an Augustus Hawkins game watching names like Joseph Smith and or Joseph Lewis, excuse me, and other fabled Nebraska recruits of yesteryear. So he's just one of those guys that I think being out there on the West Coast is going to be super appealing, but I think the job has to make sense. I would actually have more concern, though I don't think they have the money to be able to do this, if UCLA's next coach went heavily at Tony White, knowing what he did in the Big Ten and knowing that UCLA is transitioning to the Big Ten, and that's his alma mater. That's a school that I could see, but I also don't know that it makes sense for him to make that move right now either, because of the way that he has things kind of set up with Nebraska too. But then you look at it, Nebraska's schedule gets a lot harder next year. So is now the time to jump? I thought the conversation that Matt Rule had in the front of that room was one of the more interesting looks we've ever had from a head coach about this process. And I truly do appreciate that. I mean, it has been a weird season. You've been up and down in terms of trust of what you think of Matt Rule, but it seems like they have a coach that genuinely thinks about everything, that thinks about his staff, that cares at a high level. And I think that is rewarded by loyalty and great effort and everything else. And it was just a really unique look. I appreciated being able to kind of see behind the curtain in that sort of situation.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I was applauding him for the stuff that he was saying, not just about Tony White, but just about you mentioned it, like with spending, and he kind of played dad in that moment of like, hey, make sure you're making the right decision before you take this job and move across the state, or before you go to school at this university, right? Like it seemed like a very dad-like moment, but that's at least how Coach Rule acts with this team and this staff, is like he kind of oversees everything and is willing to take the blame on everything, even if it doesn't apply to him.
Yeah, I was thinking in my head of my dad looking at me and wondering if I knew what media people actually made in local markets. Back when I was 18 years old. Didn't quite follow up on that one.
It's all right. My dad still asked me why I took the check I did when I got into it, Schaefer. Okay, let's get you out of here on this, Schaefer. About 2 minutes left. Iowa, Nebraska, officially the lowest all-time total in FBS history at 26.5.
You got to be proud, right?
Like that's
you
a
just
win.
have to look at this and just own the hell out of it. You have a team across the way that fans around here have mocked routinely for their offense, and yet where does Nebraska find itself when you separate the Quinn Newsome return for a touchdown and you look at the total points scored, and they're really dangerously close right there with Iowa. So, they're right there, I think, averaging in Big Ten play right around 13 points a game. So that's the number. I mean, I'm proud of everyone involved. I don't know what Friday is going to look like. I suspect a lot of punts. I weirdly feel like it's going to be a little anticlimactic for Iowa. So it sort of works in Nebraska's favor, I think, in that regard. Like, I don't know if Iowa still had to punch its ticket to the Big Ten title game.
Yeah,
I think you're going to get a much stronger punch. Not that they aren't going to come out and play well, because I think they will do that too. But it's a different sort of feel to that game. Not that they're going to give it away, but it might have helped Nebraska to a degree that this has already been wrapped up for them. Now, what won't help Nebraska is their inability to stay out of their own way. So they've still got that, and they can be excited about it.
Hey, 5 straight unders in a row for Iowa. 5
hammering that 26.5 under.
We love consistency around here. Just wonderful.
I'm gonna drive that thing to 24 if I can.
Yeah, I'm buying down. I'm going to 21.
I'm gonna try and get plus money on this thing. Shape, we appreciate it as always. Have a happy Thanksgiving, and we'll talk to you again next week.
All right, you guys have a great week.
See you, man.
That's our guy, Mike J. Schaefer from Husker 24/7. Great stuff there from Schaefer. Coming up next, we've got a little Hurrdat hot seat here on Hurrdat Sports Radio.
We will be back. We will be back. We will be back.